Good afternoon. Hi there. It's Miss Beth again. Winston's here, but Winston got his hair done today, so I think he's feeling a little camera shy. But maybe he'll peek his head over as the story goes on. You'll get to see his new do. So we're continuing today with the tale of Despereaux. Before we get started, I just want to say a big hello to Bree, one of my former students, and any other kids from PYE who might be listening that I've had in the past. I'm so glad you're listening, and I hope you really like the story. And I also want to say a big hello to my friend Maggie and her mom, Anne, who's also my friend. I'm glad you two are listening too. So let's get started and find out what happens to Despereaux in chapters 2 and 3 today. So you get a 2 for 1. Chapter 2, such a disappointment. Despereaux Tilling lived, but his existence was cause for much speculation in the mouse community. "He's the smallest mouse I've ever seen," said his Aunt Florence. "It's ridiculous. No mouse has ever been this small. Not even a Tilling." She looked at Despereaux with narrowed eyes, as if she expected him to disappear entirely. No mouse. Ever. Despereaux, with his tail wrapped around his feet, stared back at her. "Those are some big ears he's got, too," observed his Uncle Alfred. "They look more like donkey ears, if you ask me." "They're obscenely large ears," said Aunt Florence. Despereaux wiggled his ears. His Aunt Florence gasped. "They say he was born with his eyes open," whispered Uncle Alfred. Despereaux stared hard at his uncle. "Impossible," said Aunt Florence. "No mouse, no matter how small or obscenely large-eared, is ever born with his eyes open. It simply isn't done." "His pa, Lester, says he's not well," said Uncle Alfred. Despereaux sneezed. Achoo! He said nothing in defense of himself. How could he? Everything his aunt and uncle said was true. He was ridiculously small. His ears were obscenely large, and he had been born with his eyes open. And he was sickly. He coughed and sneezed so often that he carried a handkerchief in one paw at all times. He ran temperatures. He fainted at loud noises. Most alarming of all, he showed no interest in the things a mouse should show interest in. He did not think constantly of food. He was not intent on tracking down every crumb. While his larger, older siblings ate, Despereaux stood with his head cocked to one side, holding very still. "Do you hear that sweet, sweet sound?" he said. I hear the sound of cake crumbs falling on out of people's mouths and hitting the floor," said his brother Toulet. "That's what I hear." "No," said Despereaux. "It's like, honey. You might have big ears, said Toulet, but they're not attached right to your brain. You don't hear honey. You smell honey. When there's honey to smell, which there isn't. Son, barked Despereaux's father, snap to it. Get your head out of the clouds and hunt for crumbs. Please, said his mother. Look for crumbs. Eat them to make your mama happy. You are such the skinny mouse. You are a disappointment to your mama. Sorry, said Despereaux, and he lowered his head and sniffed the castle floor. But reader, he was not smelling. He was listening with his big ears to the sweet sound that no other mouse seemed to hear. Chapter 3. Once upon a time. Despereaux's siblings tried to educate him in the ways of being a mouse. His brother Furlough took him on a tour of the castle to demonstrate the art of scurrying. Do you know what scurrying is? I'm sure you do, because I'm sure you've had to scurry to get ready for school when the school bus is coming. Move side to side, instructed Furlough, scrabbling across the waxed castle floor. Look over your shoulder all the time, first to the right, then to the left. Don't stop for anything. But Despereaux wasn't listening to Furlough. He was staring at the light pouring in through the stained glass window in the castle. He stood on his hind legs and he held his handkerchief over his heart. And he stared up, up, up into the brilliant light. Furlough, he said, what is this thing? What are all these colors? Are we in heaven? Cripes! Shouted Furlough from a far corner. Don't stand there in the middle of the floor talking about heaven. Move! You're a mouse, not a man. You've got to scurry. What? Said Despereaux, still staring at the light. But Furlough was gone. He had, like a good mouse, disappeared into a hole in the molding. Well, Despereaux's sister, Merlot, took him into the castle library, where light came streaming in through tall, high windows and landed on the floor in bright yellow patches. Here, said Merlot, follow me, small brother, and I will instruct you on the fine points of how to nibble paper. Merlot scurried up a chair, and from there hopped onto a table on which there sat a huge open book. This way, small brother, she said, as she crawled onto the pages of the book. And Despereaux followed her from the arm of the chair to the table to the page. Now then, said Merlot, this glue here is tasty, and the paper edges are crunchy and yummy, like so. She nibbled an edge of a page and then looked over at Despereaux. Now you try, she said. First a bite of some glue, and then follow it with a crunch of paper. And these squiggles, they are very tasty. Despereaux looked down at the book, and something remarkable happened. The marks on the pages, the squiggles, as Merlot referred to them, arranged themselves into shapes. And the shapes arranged themselves into words. And the words spelled out a delicious and wonderful phrase. Once upon a time. Once upon a time, whispered Despereaux. What? Asked Merlot. Oh, nothing. Eat, said Merlot. Oh, I couldn't possibly, said Despereaux, backing away from the book. Why? Said Despereaux. It would ruin the story. The story? What story? Merlot stared at him. A piece of paper trembled at the end of one of her indignant whiskers. It's just like Pa said when you were born. Something is not right with you. She turned and she scurried from the library to tell her parents about this latest disappointment. Despereaux waited until she was gone, and then he reached out and with one paw touched the lovely words, once upon a time. He shivered. Achoo! He sneezed. He blew his nose into the handkerchief. I'll leave that to your imagination. Make a movie of it in your head. Once upon a time, he said aloud, relishing the sound. And then, tracing each word with his paw, he read the beautiful story about a princess and a brave knight who serves and honors her. Despereaux did not know it, but he would need very soon to be brave himself. Have I mentioned that beneath the castle there was a dungeon? In the dungeon there were rats. Large rats. Mean rats. Despereaux was destined to meet those rats. Reader, you must know that an interesting fate, sometimes involving rats, sometimes not, awaits almost everyone, mouse or man, who does not conform. Do you know what a fate is? Fate is something that happens to you and you can't stop it from happening. It just happens. And do you know what conform means? Conform means that you have to be like everybody else. Do you think that Despereaux will conform? I don't think he has so far. Wonder if he will later in the story. Guess we have to read more to find out. I hope you'll join me tomorrow as we read more chapters of the Tale of Despereaux. See you tomorrow.